Don't just celebrate outcomes, celebrate improvements, point to improvements. Don't find fault like there's a reward for it. You never develop somebody by condemning them. Tell them the truth in love, show them a way to improve. It's a process used to improve performance. And we don't do that through belittling, by embarrassing them. You don't motivate through humiliation, through condemnation. It's through process, it's through encouragement, it is through accountability. Saying, was that the best you could do? No, what would your best have looked like? Okay, why do you think that didn't show up? So what can we expect to see going forward? Learning how to have those conversations with them.
Welcome to The Golf Parent, where you get access to the best minds in junior golf. Dave, I am really looking forward to this conversation. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Ryan, thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
So off air, we were just talking about the power of some of the morning routines that you were talking about. And you were sharing with me a story about how your morning almost got away from you this morning and how some of your systems and some of the ways that you can reset the momentum in the morning. Maybe just share with the audience. Let's just start right there. What happened to you this morning?
There's a chapter in the book about routines and rituals, and just because if you have, now let me just start with this. Those are two different things, Ryan. A routine is a block of time you set aside to do something. The rituals are the steps within that block of time that determine how effective it is. A lot of people have a work routine. They're not very effective because of the things they do there. They have a practice routine. They can say, well, I practice 4 days a week from X to Y, but they're not really getting better because of the steps. So I love routines and rituals because when things do get out of hand, things you can't control, it gives you something to get back to. It gives you something to get back in the moment. And I was sharing with you, I get up very early. I was up at 4 a.m., so I'm getting out of the shower at 5, and the fire alarms go off throughout my house. And I have these 2 massive guard dogs in the house. They're going crazy. They think we're being invaded. And I can't figure out how to shut them off. And I'm running through the house dripping wet, trying to figure it out. My wife is out of town. It took me about 30 minutes to get the noise down and to figure it out. And it's like my day started as a disaster, a lot of stuff beyond what I could control. But I'm a big believer in getting in a rhythm early. And so I walk back into the bedroom when all the madness is finished, and I notice my unmade bed. It's like, okay, well, here's where you start. You get right back on track. You start stacking those wins early in the day. You start building your own momentum. And it gave me a chance just again to remember how important this is, that when stuff happens that you can't control, and it happens a lot, right? Doesn't matter what you do, playing golf, in the workplace, whatever, that if you have a routine to go to, it centers you, it gets you back in the moment, it gets you back in control, and you can start moving forward again. If you don't have something to go to, you're still just all over the place. And so the athletes I work with, just like the business people I work with, I'm huge on having solid routines from the minute you wake up in the morning to where you can start feeling good about yourself. You can start building your momentum. Too many people, they leave momentum to chance. I think you can create your own by making right decisions, by doing your best with the little things, whether it's how you groom or hydrating when you get up or making your bed. And it just creates this rhythm that follows you into school, follows you into the workplace, follows you into the golf course. And so, yeah, I was reminded sometimes the words come back. It's like, yeah, this is why this is important, right? Because it gives me something to go to after the stuff hits the proverbial fan, if you will.
It's so true. And so for those that are just listening to the podcast, Dave's new book is Elevate Your Excellence: The Power of Doing Ordinary Things Extraordinarily Well. And for those viewers, here's the book as well. In the first chapter, or at least the book starts with talking about winning your morning. And it's interesting because I find with myself that if I don't have a clear plan in the morning, if I don't do those rituals or have some sort of kind of set procedure in the morning, I find that the whole day almost gets away from you, where you're almost reactionary to the day and you're kind of bumbling through the day. Whereas those days, and it usually for me at least, it would start the night before, where even just writing down, hey, listen, these are the most important things that I want to do the following day. You kind of wake up with a plan. And man, does that ever seem to, as you say, stacking the wins, does that ever help you to be intentional and kind of take charge of your day? Let's talk about those morning routines a little bit. So some of the athletes you're working with, and the audience that's listening to this are trying to be the best parents that they can be, and helping to kind of instill, good routines and good habits in their children. What would a good morning routine kind of look like in your eyes?
I'll give you an example, a real life example about he was a college basketball player that I work with professional athletes as a mental skills trainer. They all play basketball, but competition is competition. I don't know why they all play basketball. It just developed that way. So I'm talking to this guy. He plays at a Big Ten school over on the East Coast in the States. And I'm having my first Zoom conversation with him. And I'm trying to instill this principle that we're talking about. And I said, Paul, did you make your bed this morning? And, he's 21 years old. He gave me the typical answer, well, no. I said, if I were coming over to visit you today, would you make your bed? And he said, well, yes. I said, now, Paul, why would you have a higher standard for someone else than you have for yourself? I said, if you're going to work with me, I want you to start the day with a win. All right. I want you to start stacking wins. I said, our goal is to win the first hour of the morning. If you win the first hour, you can win the morning. If you win the morning, you have a really good chance of winning the day. But if you don't do your best early on, then what you have to understand is the conditioning that's taking place. You condition your mind that that's okay. It's okay to cut a corner. It's okay to do less than my best. And then I'm probably going to excuse why it wasn't important anyway. I didn't have the time. It's not that big of a deal. And so you have to understand that with every decision you make, I said, Paul, from the minute you wake up, you're training your conscience. People don't understand the conditioning. It's about the conditioning. You're training your conscience to either have a high standard for yourself or to excuse a less than great standard for yourself. And I said, so you're going to make your bed in the morning. I said, you're going to send me a picture of it for the next 2 weeks because I want to make sure you're not just doing it to do it, but you're actually doing a good job. He said, what's the big deal about making the bed? Which is a fair question. I said, it's not the made bed that's the big deal. It's the person you become in the process of making it. It's having self-esteem, having more confidence, following a process, getting a win early, developing more discipline, raising your personal standards. And when you can start that early, and then I said, but by the time you walk into the gym to practice, I want you to have 8 or 9 or 10 wins stacked. We're going to talk about hydrating, all right? Because everybody wakes up dehydrated. There's a chapter in the book about how dehydration affects us, and it affects us in a lot of severe ways. And we all wake up dehydrated because all that moisture that goes out while we're sleeping through breath and nothing coming in. And so that's another easy win, getting that hydration down early. We're going to talk about the grooming routine, not just skimping through the process just to perfume last night's funk so you're acceptable today in some way, but to do it in a way that you feel good about yourself. And then we're going to talk about doing something that you read in the morning or listen to that gets your mindset right. We're going to talk about 10 minutes to get your mindset right because a mind is like a body. It can't fend for itself. It needs to be developed. You can't just let it be subject to all the negativity and all the news and the nonsense, and it's going to get hijacked. And you're going to be just like the stuff you're listening to. So we're going to review your goals. We're going to review your why. We're going to come up with some affirmations. And I said, we're going to look at, not leaving dishes in the sink. Okay. Because you're in a hurry, because that's not your best. And once you can start looking for little ways to get that win, all of a sudden now you've created momentum. Momentum is earned, Ryan. It's earned. You don't just wait for something to happen to create momentum. I mean, you can, but it might be a long wait. It's not a great strategy. And so if you look up the definition of momentum, it's called a driving force gained by following a process or a course of events. And so I want to be that driving force when I leave the house. And I need to follow a course of events. I need to follow a process, stacking wins, as I call it in the book, that creates that. So when I walk into my office, I've already tried to stack 8 or 9 wins, even when the morning starts with the fire alarms going off. There's a sign above my office door that says, be the boxer, not the bag. Well, the only way I can be the boxer and not the bag is if I come in and I have set the pace. I'm setting the tone. Otherwise, I'm just reacting like the bag, getting pounded around by life, and then probably making excuses about the success I don't have from the routines I won't develop. So it all begins with how you start. Right? Some people, they dig themselves a hole the first hour, 2 hours of the day. They're so sloppy. They cut so many corners. They compromise in so many areas. And then they make excuses for why that's okay. And that's what they're training their brain to do. So now here's the problem. Now they walk into a higher stakes arena. Okay, that's a lot higher stakes than making a bed. Okay, they're making that shot, right? They got the pressure on. And they're trying to find that switch that goes to excellence, but they're not about excellence. They're too far away from it. They've dug themselves a hole. And so it's about having excellence be part of everything you do. Just doing the best you can with everything you do, to where when you really need to come through, you're not looking for excellence. It's all you know. It becomes part of your nature. So that's why it's important to start early. People say, well, it's just anal, all these picky little things you talk about doing. I said, you're missing the point. It's about the conditioning. It's about raising your personal standards, expecting more of yourself, training your conscience to expect your best, to now when you're in that higher stakes arena, you're already there. That's already your expectation. You're not looking for that excellence. It's part of your nature. That's why it's important. It's not the made bed. It's the people we become in the process of making it, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense, and the becoming part I think is important in this conversation because certain personalities seem like they come out of the womb almost conscientious, a little bit more diligent, a little bit more detail focused, and others are a little bit more scattered, nebulous, and they're just they're not a focused type personality. And it really does sound like this is a learned behavior that, regardless of where you are on the spectrum of like kind of diligence or neurotic, like neuroticness, I don't know. I'm not saying that right, but like it's wherever you are in that spectrum that this is a learned. You can develop these habits that no matter what are going to help you become that type of person that is more in control of their day, and if they're in control of their day, they're in control of their life. Is that fair to say?
It's very fair to say, which means, let's just say this, because this often gets overlooked. Let's say I'm the parent of a highly talented kid. I mean, he or she is a natural. They've just got that natural talent. I have to be particularly careful in that case because, in my experience working with athletes, the highly talented ones are the most likely sometimes to be sloppy because they can still be sloppy and perform well. The talent compensates for some of their lack of hard work and some of their lack of discipline. And so they think it's okay because look how good I am. Look what I do. But what they don't realize is, what could you be doing? Where might you be if you would also tie up these loose ends and get a little bit better here? So hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Toughness beats talent when talent isn't tough. And so it's about being particularly aware of these highly talented kids that can get away with it, can get away with not doing these little things and still performing well, and them not realizing where they could be. There's a huge difference between being successful and reaching your fullest potential. And that gap usually has to be closed with discipline and consistency in processes. You can only wing your way so far. You can only make up your day as you go along and shoot from the hip and zig and zag for so long before you start to plateau. So it's being particularly aware that's important for everybody, but especially for the most naturally gifted kids that we have, because they're getting results without doing that. So they don't think it's necessary.
Hmm. I feel like, Dave, it's taken me 40 plus years to really understand the significant impact that discipline has on. I mean, I think as humans, we're all trying to reach we're trying to actualize our potential. We're all trying to become the best parents, the best fathers, husbands, CEOs, whatever it is. We all have this kind of innate desire to just kind of see how great we can become. And discipline is, it really does seem to be that component, because without discipline, you're just floundering. And growing up, I always seemed to have I had a problem with authority. And so any idea of discipline, I went completely against it, thinking that, discipline was almost like a bad word, where it's like I'd rather be an anarchist than disciplined. But I realized that it's the self-discipline that's what you actually can control, is the discipline of your mind. And if you can control that, everything else becomes way more in your control.
Well, there's no doubt about it. In discipline, you're dead on. It gets a bad rap. There's this negative association with the word discipline. Okay, this kid needs discipline, or this department lacks discipline. And we act like discipline is this straitjacket that we have to wear, this burden that we bear, that we carry through life, that just limits all of our joy, and it just limits us. But discipline is freedom. Discipline gives you more options. Discipline is about
100%.
giving up what you want now for what you want most. It's about making trade-offs. And so I think when you start to look at discipline the right way, it's when I'm talking to people about following processes. Let's face it, it takes discipline to stick with it, to be consistent. People who lack consistency lack discipline. Discipline fuels consistency. So the only way to become more consistent is to develop more discipline, or you're going to be hit and miss too often. But they say, Dave, I don't like the process. And I say, well, listen, let me give you some great news. You don't have to love the process. You don't even have to like it. You just have to love where it'll take you and do it every time, follow it every time. It's like if you're trying to lose weight, it's not a fun process, right? You got to eat stuff you don't want, stop eating stuff you do want, get up in the morning and sweat instead of sleep in. But you love where it'll take you. You love the outcome, the energy, the change in confidence, the change in lifestyle. I said a process is not punishment, it's protection. It protects you from bad habits. It protects you from missing your potential, from self-destructing. And so I think we'll never embrace discipline until we change how we look at it. And there will always be that negative connotation. But the fact is, the more discipline you have, Ryan, as you know, the more options you actually have. The more disciplined you are with your body, the more options you have. It gives you freedom to do things you couldn't do ordinarily. The more disciplined you are with your money, as you go through life, you have more options, not fewer options. How you want to live, where you want to go. The more disciplined you are with your learning, working on yourself, you have more options for adding value and solving problems and creating ideas. And so we have to change how we look at it. However, let's dig a little deeper. And I would say that discipline is not a matter of will, it's a matter of your why. Okay.
Mm,
And I think the people that have a strong, because you can only will your way so far. The will wanes. Okay. You can will your way. The why, when I talk about the why gets talked about a lot. The why is your internal motivator. We all have a why. I talk about this a lot in my book, Unstoppable. The why has to basically answer two questions. Why do you get up in the morning? And why should anybody else even care that you get up in the morning? In other words, what do you want for yourself, and who's counting on you to come through? What type of person are you trying to become? What do you aspire to do? How do you aspire to live? Where do you aspire to go? And then who needs your help? Who do you want to add value to? And if that why isn't really clear and compelling and relevant, and I'm talking about starting at a young age, you got to figure it out. You're going to be all over the place. But when your internal motivator is strong, when you have a powerful why, I mean, when I was 19 years old, I was living in a house by myself, infested with rats. My family's business had just gone under. They left town. They were running from creditors. I moved into the only place I could afford, and I didn't even own a couch. My why was very simple then. Okay. I needed a second pair of shoes, and I needed decent food to eat and a couch. It was very simple. So your why changes throughout your life. But I wanted that stuff so bad, I worked 3 jobs. I didn't need a pep talk. I didn't need someone to come along. I knew no one was coming to rescue me. So I was very motivated. I didn't need external motivation. And you lose your way when you lose your why. And so it's helping these kids too find out, why are you really doing what you're doing? What type of person are you trying to become? Where is it going to take you? What do you want to have as an impact along the way? And the earlier on you can start to really articulate that, and then I review it every morning. That's part of my 10 minutes of morning routine. I don't need a pep talk. I don't need that pat on the back. It's nice. It's not necessary, because there's stuff I want so bad, I can't be inconsistent. There's stuff I want so bad, consistency is not a problem for me. I don't want to do it, but I do it anyway. Then I feel better because I did it, because it's going to get me to where I want to go. So discipline is an inside job. It can't just come from external motivation and external threats or deadlines. That can get you so far, but it has to come from within. It has to come from that inner hunger. and it's helping kids, helping anybody. I know people that are 70 years old, they don't know what their why is, and you lose your way when you lose your why. So they never stick with anything. They're always starting, but they quit when it gets tough. So the why powers you through. It's not a magic formula to get consistency. It starts within. So I tell people, if you're inconsistent, it's your fault. The good news is, if I don't tell you that to beat you up, if it's your fault, that's actually good news because you can fix it. Okay. You can
Mm.
make a better choice. You can choose better disciplines. You can make better decisions. And so, if you really look at the difference between good or great performers in anything, it's so much of it goes back to consistency. The best performers just do the things others don't want to do. They do more of it, they do it more often, and they do it when they don't feel like doing it. And then they feel better because they did it. But there's something inside of them that makes them do it. It's not always that external nudge or threat or bribe that they need to get it done. So it's looking within yourself. It's not a magic formula. It's inside of you. You just got to figure out what it is.
There's a lot of parents listening to this right now, and kind of hovering on the why and the motivation aspect. There's a lot of parents that, I mean, kids nowadays, it's a little bit different, obviously, growing up with all the distractions, with all the instant gratification, the dopamine hits. There's so much that kids now have to combat to be able to actualize their lives and their potential. And for those parents that are struggling then with trying to help guide their child to find their why, to find that internal motivation instead of just always the, the carrot or the stick externally, what advice would you give to those parents to kind of help maybe, a boy or girl that's in their, adolescence or preteen kind of years, those pivotal years, to make sure that they can figure out what it is that they're here for, and what do they want out of this life?
You know, I think a lot of kids, a lot of adults get off track in that area when they start making improper comparisons and they look at what other people are doing, they look at what other people are getting, and it can distort who they want to become. And sometimes they can even feel worse about themselves. I I really encourage parents to get kids to be more within themselves, to teach them that the only legitimate comparison. Forget the stuff you see on social media. Yeah, half of that's a lie anyway. It's just something somebody's spinning to make their life look a lot more interesting than it really is. The only legitimate comparison is you versus you. Okay, the person you are today versus who you were yesterday. That's all you can control, and there will always be room to improve. So you think about what type of person you're trying to become. What growth objectives do you have? You can't get better at 10 things at once. Let's pick two or three. All right, two or three particular areas where you want to improve. Let's get really specific on what that would look like in 90 days. You have to get intentional with growth objectives. Intentional means on purpose. And then once we have those growth objectives, let's put together a plan to close the gap between where you're at and where you want to go. And let's forget about how everybody else is doing in those areas, because you can't control that. If you're looking at people constantly who are doing better than you, be aware of it, but don't be obsessed by it, because that can kill contentment. Comparison kills contentment. Maybe you've overcome a ton. Maybe you've gone through a lot and you've really grown. And you're looking at this person up here that's still so much better than you. And all of a sudden you can feel worse about yourself because it's an illegitimate comparison. You should be comparing yourself to who you were yesterday, a month ago, 6 months ago. So moving forward, let's make that the baseline. Let's see where we're at, and let's come up with two or three key growth objectives to improve. Let's just talk about your game and what that would look like, and what that would look like with your habits, and what that would look like with your attitude, and what that would look like with your skill. Maybe you have an ability to do it, but you're not very skilled at it yet. And then let's start comparing ourselves to who we were yesterday in those regards. That keeps us moving forward. Another danger is if you're comparing yourself to other people, it can make you cocky if you're better than they are.
Hmm.
So sometimes we're looking at people who are down there and we're up here. And in that case, comparison doesn't kill contentment. Comparison kindles cockiness and complacency. And again, the only legitimate comparison is you versus you, baby. So we have to fixate our kids' eyes on that goal, but also helping them come up with a reasonable intentional plan to close that gap. I hear people say all the time, well, I just want to chase greatness. So you don't chase greatness. You don't chase great. If your habits and daily routines are here, okay, and greatness is over here, you can't get to greatness with those same habits and daily routines. You've got to chase the right habits. You've got to chase the right routines. You've got to chase the right mindsets. You've got to chase the right skill development. Then you can catch greatness. But you just don't chase greatness from where you're at now, because what gets you here won't get you there. So it's getting intentional and focusing on what they can control, which is being better today with my attitude, with my discipline, with my character choices, right? With my skills than I was yesterday. That is a great benchmark for moving forward and for having clear goals and for making that part of your why. Part of your why is the person you want to become, the skills you want to develop, the knowledge you want to acquire, the habits you need to get, the bad ones you need to get rid of. That's part of your why. And so I think by coaching our kids in that respect, we put them in control. We get them out of some of this comparison trap, and we give them a real clear direction where they can measure their progress, and it keeps them hungry because they realize I still need to improve in these areas, regardless that I might be better than some of these other people. And I think a lot of people try to grow, but they're not intentional with it. Identify the objectives, work on them for a quarter, resource those objectives with the right podcast, the right mentor, the right coaching, the right practice, and get intentional in that regard. And it creates incredible momentum and self-esteem and self-confidence and becomes an enormous part of your why. That's what I would suggest.
Hmm. What do we do when we fall? So we have our child that it's motivated, is making their bed in the morning, has certain goals, has a clear intention of who they want to become or what they want to work on in this quarter. But it often happens where, we may stack up 3 weeks of wins. We may do really, really well for a while. And then something happens where we stumble, we fall. Maybe we don't make our bed, that day. Maybe it compounds for a couple of days. We may be beat up ourselves a little bit. What would you suggest in that sense when either ourselves or our child stumbles? How do we get them back on track?
First of all, I think that's a great question. And I think it's important to have the right perspective up front, that none of this is about perfection. It's about progress. It's about progress. We're human beings. I tell you, you're going to get off track. You're human. I get off track. I write books about this stuff. I get off track. Okay. I've spoken in 21 countries about this stuff. I get off track. So listen, the goal, let's get off track less often. And when we do get off track, let's catch it quicker and get back on track. But in order to do that, we have to have a really clear track to begin with. So it's establishing the track, because if you're not on a clear track, you don't know when you're off of it. What I love about really great routines and rituals, like if you're driving on a brand new superhighway and there's no road noise, there's no potholes, it's wonderful. If you turn your head and get off track for just a second and you end up on this bumpy dirt road, you're going to recognize it really quick, because the path you were on was so precise that you notice the deviation faster. The danger is if you stay on that bumpy road too long, you can start to get used to it, and it starts to feel normal. So it's, first of all, having that really clear track, and then knowing you're going to get off of it, but it's going to happen less often, and we're going to catch it quicker. And teaching people that failure is feedback. Okay, failure is feedback. It's not fatal. If everything is a matter of life and death, you're going to be dead a lot. So we can't look at it that way. I just got some feedback. I need to get a little more polished in this area. I need to become a little more consistent in that area. I still have some work to do. That keeps me humble. It keeps me hungry. One of the affirmations I teach my athletes that I work with, I teach them a couple. Number one is, and this has been one that's really helped a lot of them that have worked through injuries as well. Things don't happen to me, they happen for me. I've got to make the pain pay. So when you lose, when you stumble, you did everything you're supposed to do. You put in all the work, you followed all the processes, you still come up short. Okay, that's painful. All right, let's not get bitter. Let's get better. How can we make the pain pay? What are the lessons? How will this reignite my why to get better in a particular area? Who do I have to work harder to prove wrong? Who do I have to work harder to show, that they were right to believe in me? I always like to flip the script, because if we start talking about what happens to us, let me tell you what happened to me. I got cheated. This happened. Now we're a victim. And when we start to blame, Ryan, as you know, we lose all of our personal power. So we only have power when we're working on the things we can control. I was working with an athlete one time when I was working with the University of Indiana, the Indiana Hoosiers, and I was their mental skills trainer. And this guy was going to be a lottery pick. He was going to be a top 10 pick going into the NBA, and he blew his knee out. And
Mm.
this was his sophomore year, but he was only going to play college 2 years. He was entering the draft. He's an athletic freak. His name's OG Anunoby. And he blew his knee out. And a short time later, after he'd had a chance to process it mentally, I said, OG, I know this is really hard for you to go through right now. He said, yeah, my season's over. I said, I know. I said, but I want you to start giving some thought to how this could possibly benefit you in the long run. And he almost ripped my head off. He said, are you out of your mind? He said, there's no way this can benefit me. My season's over. I'm not going to be drafted top 10. I may not even go in the first round now. I said, calm down. I want you to at least start thinking about how could this possibly benefit you. See, we have to shift their energy. We have to shift their focus from victimhood into, okay, how can I make this pain pay? He texted, I said, I want you to think about it and text me within 48 hours. He texted me within a day. He said, Dave, he said, here's what I thought. You know what? I am going to go later in the draft. But because I go later, I'm going to get picked by a better team, because the worst teams get the earliest picks usually. He said, so I have a chance to get playoff experience earlier in my career. He said that could pad my resume to where when it comes time for my second contract, I could really be paid well, because that's where they make their money, is on the second contract. He said, I still don't like it. He said, don't get me wrong. It's still miserable, but I am looking at it differently. I said, that's all I asked you to do. And and so he stumbled. It wasn't his fault. This was beyond his control, but it still happened to him. Well, here's what happened. He did go later in the draft. He didn't go top 10. I think he went 23. He was chosen by the Toronto Raptors. And 2 years later, he was a world champion. That would not have happened if he went top 10. So it's helping people to reframe it when they're too close to it. This hurts right now. How can we make it pay? What are the lessons? Let's not let this happen to us. How can it make us stronger, wiser, better? And coaching them to look at it that way, because my friend, that is not the natural way to look at it. So we have to help them look at things unnaturally. And that takes a little outside intervention.
I was actually living in Toronto when when they won, and it was it was a wild ride, that's for sure. So I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. Um, it certainly seems like the way that we look at things, our perspective on what's happening, if we can just kind of change the narrative, if we can change the story of what we're telling. I mean, it certainly seems like we're storytellers, and we're always telling a story one way or the other about everything that's happening. And if we can rewrite the narrative to exactly what you're saying, from like victimhood to actually like using it as a positive, it I don't know what it is about our brains, but it just like, it's whatever direction we decide to kind of focus on, the emotions, everything will just follow down that track. But if we can just like slightly change it, all of a sudden it just changes everything. Why is that? Like, how, without getting into the neuroscience of it, but like why does it seem to be that it's just, if we change the narrative, we change our lives?
There's no doubt about it. The thing is, we're born with a negative narrative built into us. I talk about it in the book, and our brain has a negativity bias. Um, we all have it. And to understand that, I know it even sounds negative to say that, but the brain doesn't care about making us happy. The brain cares a lot about keeping us alive, helping you survive. So in order to help you survive, it will always notice what's wrong faster. It will bring your attention. Be careful. Don't change anything. Don't try again. Stay down here. Get back to where it's comfortable. This is how we are naturally conditioned. Don't take a risk. Don't get noticed too much because then you might have your survival threatened, right? You don't have to put in extra work. Get back down here where everybody else is, where it's safe,
Mm.
because this is comfortable, it's manageable. Why risk failure? Why try something new? And so the brain has good intentions in keeping us alive. I appreciate the negativity bias that says, Dave, it's a bad idea to walk down that dark alley in New York City at night by yourself. Okay, I appreciate that negativity bias. But we also have to understand how it does work against us. So it takes intentional effort to rewire that. We put in a lot of negative reps throughout the years. We've had a lot of negative reps put into us by other people, telling us what we can't do, what we're not fit for, what we won't make, how we won't amount to things. And so we got to redo those reps. We got to put in a lot of the right reps to redo that. That's why I like 10 minutes in the morning from mental mastery. I talk about it in the book, that intentional something to where you're reviewing your why, you're reviewing your affirmations. An affirmation is simply a positive statement about who you want to become. Things don't happen to me, they happen for me. I've got to find a way to make the pain pay. That's one of my favorite go-to affirmations. Another one of my affirmations is I renounce excuses. Another one is I own it. Now, I'm not 100% in any of those areas, but by rewiring my brain that that's my standard, I'm a lot better at it than I used to be. So I started with 3 or 4 affirmations. I would just find an area of my life I wanted to improve, and I'd make a positive statement about it. And I was putting in that positive rep in my brain to help unwind some of the bad reps that have acquired. I'm 63 now, over a long period of time. And so you have to be intentional to rewire your mind. You know, I ask a question in my seminars. I say, how many of you would agree that having the right mindset is more influential to success than skills, knowledge, talent, or experience? Everybody raises their hand. Yeah, it's a
100%.
huge deal,
Yeah.
right? Because mindset activates all those other things. And I tell them, I said, good, I agree with you. I said, now, based on it being that important, I have another question for you. How much time do you spend intentionally every day working on yours? Well, you could hear a pin drop every time. You get the deer caught in the headlights look, because people realize they just said, hey, this is a really big deal. And now I'm not doing anything intentionally to make it better. And so it's just having that intentional something. And it's not about being at a certain age to where you can start this. You can start to put positive things into your mind at any age, just like you can start to put negative things into your mind at any age. It has nothing to do with that age. It has to do a lot with the conditioning and the consistency of it. And so that's why I think that's a very relevant chapter in the book, is just 10 minutes. It's not overwhelming. That's a huge win. We talked about stacking wins. Come on, putting some of the right stuff in your mind in the morning to get it conditioned to put in some of those positive reps. That's going to steer you for a lot of the rest of the day.
Hmm. You've mentioned a few times three, like almost the power of three, like 3 affirmations that we can kind of work on 3 areas of our life quarterly, like 3 goals. What it's at the sweet spot? Like it's if I wanted to get better, should I focus on around 3 areas or 3 affirmations or 3 things? Anything more than that is it more likely that we'll not be able to get to all of them, or that our energy or our focus will be scattered?
Great question. Everybody's a little different. Everybody has a different capacity. Like when I was talking about growth objectives, 3 areas, and like one might be a skill area, one might be a habit area,
Hmm.
and one might be a mindset area. I think it's hard to work on 3 skills at the same time. It's hard to work on 3 habits at the same time. But if we're looking at different areas, okay, I need to improve my mindset in this area. I blame too much. I make too many excuses. I got to be more aware of it. In fact, I'm going to come up with a couple affirmations. I renounce excuses and I own it, that are going to rewire my mind that that's the person I want to become. And I'm going to really work on that. And then this skill, it's really not a skill, it's an ability. I got to turn it into a skill. It's the weakest part of my game. All right. Because an ability is the capacity to perform a task. A skill is the ability to perform a task particularly well. So a lot of us have abilities that aren't skills. So I'm going to really put in extra reps. I'm never going to get great at anything I don't do a lot. I have to put in the reps. I have to put in the repetition, and good reps, not just doing it to do it. And then this habit is holding me back. I've got to replace it with something better. I binge on Netflix 4 hours a night. Okay. And that is not a neutral use of my time. I could be maybe just watching 2 hours of it and spending another 2 hours reviewing my goals, practicing, getting in shape, doing something else. And so I've got to develop a habit. So I think in that context, 3 is really manageable. I think 3 affirmations is very, now I've added a lot over the years. I mean, I have a lot of issues. So I have a lot of different areas where I'm
You
trying
got
to
a whole
improve.
repertoire that you
I
could
think,
pull on. Yeah.
yeah, let's
All of us
start
do.
with 3. 3, yeah. Well, 3 is manageable. 3 is manageable. It's, people say, well, I have 10 priorities. And really, you have none, because you can't have 10 of something that you call a priority. It totally destroys the whole concept of it being a priority if there are 10 of them. So, what I like about 3, it narrows your focus. And you're not going to get better at everything overnight. But listen, you can get better at a lot over time. And the time is going to pass anyway. So, let's be intentional with how we use it. And that's why I like intentional growth objectives and intentional mindset routine. I'm not leaving it to chance. But yeah, it's different for everybody. But if you do 3 the way I'm talking about, I think you find it, you don't get overwhelmed. You're more likely to stick with it and actually see some good results from it.
Dave, you talk a lot about the power of intentional breathing and the power of the breath to kind of positively impact all aspects of our lives, our physiology, our mental states, all the rest of that. Maybe let's just share with the listeners your take on how powerful breathing is, and maybe 1 or 2 kind of exercises to that we could teach our kids and teach ourselves to be able to breathe more intentionally.
I have a chapter on this in the book, and it's a short chapter, but it impacts so much. People don't understand breathing. And it's interesting. Don't know if you're a baseball fan, but back when the Chicago Cubs finally won the World Series, it's
Yeah,
like it'd been over
big deal.
100 years.
Yeah.
They actually hired a mental skills trainer to work with the players that year. His name was Ken Revizza. And Ken is since deceased, but I've studied his work. He just was a really, really bright guy. And they asked the players after the season, what's the number one thing you learned from Ken? They said, we learned how to breathe. He said, what do you mean you learned how to breathe? You've been breathing since you were born. Yeah, but not intentionally. And what I talk about in the book is when you breathe in through the nose, 18% more oxygen gets to the brain. It's being aware of that. That helps you think more clearly. I mean, technically, when we get tense, we stop breathing. Okay. And I'm a martial artist, and you see it on the mat. People are getting beat and they stop breathing, which is the worst thing they can do, because now they're not thinking clearly, nor are they releasing tension. So when you inhale through the nose, 18% more oxygen gets to the brain. When you exhale through the mouth, that gets the tension out. And so it's always wanting to do that high stakes something after the exhale, after the tension is gone. The players that I work with, they're at the free throw line a lot. You can win games on basketball, or you can lose games at the free throw line. The ones that have been trained well, you'll watch their breathing. Watch their breathing. They'll take that deep inhale, and then after they exhale, they'll put up the shot. They want to put up the shot after the tension is gone. Talk to a great marksman with a rifle or a great archer. They always pull the trigger or release the bow after the exhale. And so it's learning how to do this, and it keeps you in the moment. This is one of the wins I do in the morning. I share a breathing technique in the book called 4462 times 6. I learned it from the Navy SEALs, and it takes about 2.5 minutes. I do it 6 times a day. It's easy to do. You just stack it with 6 other things that you do. And what it does is it creates the conditioning to where you're automatically doing it. Like I told you when we were talking before, that I was able to practice some intentional breathing in traffic on the way to work today. So
Yeah.
somebody cuts you off. The natural thing is to get tense. You stop breathing, you honk the horn, you do something foolish. It's just taking a couple deep breaths and it's passed. And it's, if I'm going to hold someone accountable in my office today, if I'm going to have that tough conversation with them, you're going to hold your kid accountable. You want to be thinking clearly, and you want the tension to be out. Okay. And you want to be in the moment. So you do a couple of those deep breaths. So the 4462, it's a deep inhale through the nose for a count of 4. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. You totally fill yourself up with oxygen. Then you hold it for 4. That expands your lung capacity, by the way. It also keeps you in the moment. I do this before I get out of bed. My first set before I get out of bed. It's another win. And then after you hold it for 4, you slowly release it for 6 and you get rid of all of it. Don't push it out. Let it go out. You might have to push out the last little bit. Now you're totally in the moment. All the tension is gone. And then you pause for 2 and you do it again. 44, 62. And you do it 6 times. It takes about 2.5 minutes. If you don't have time to do it 6 times, do it twice. You know, in traffic, you do it once and it helps. If I'm going to go deal with a tough situation, if an angry customer's in my face, I'm going to do a couple breaths and I'm going to handle that situation a lot better. But then teaching kids to do this multiple times during the day to where when they're in a high stress situation, it comes naturally to them. It's one of those conditioning things that we talk about to where when they're getting ready to make that big shot, you know, they don't take in a breath and hit the ball. They hit the ball after they release the breath and the tension is gone and they're thinking clearly and it's in the moment. People say, I'll never remember to do it 6 times a day. Well, the best way to start a new habit is to stack it with one you have. And so this is different for everybody, but what are we all going to do every morning? Hopefully we're going to get up. I guess the morning will come when we don't. But until then, you're going to get up every morning. So there's your first one. And then I have a mindset routine that I do every morning. I've talked to you about it just on our time together today. I want to be in the moment. I want to be thinking clearly. So I'll do another one then. And then I'll start my mindset routine. I commute to work every morning, you know, and so there's another one. I do it during my commute. There's 3. I have 3 before I walk in the door. That's 3 more wins before I walk in the door. I'm already in the moment. I'm thinking clearly. I'm in control. It's good for my body, my mind. I have a thinking hour. I spend every day from 12 to 1. I don't go to lunch. I drink a protein shake. I have my thinking counter. I go there. I look out at the mountains and I have my pad and I think and I write down ideas for books, podcast programs. There's my 4th one. My 5th one I do on the commute home. My 6th one I do when I lay down to go to bed. And sometimes it helps put me to sleep. I don't even make it through all 6 of them. So we all have something that we do with some degree of regularity during the day. So to do something 6 times a day, stack it with one of those. Stack it with one of those. If you only do it 4 times a day, that's still 4 wins. If you do it once a day, that's still a win. But then understanding how it can help you in high stress situations. To take that deep breath through the nose, thinking clearly, get rid of that tension, and master the moment in front of your face. Be present. Be where your feet are. That's the beautiful thing about intentional breathing. And it's just an easy win. It's an easy edge that anybody can develop, whether they're holding someone accountable, they're dealing with somebody angry, or they're in a high pressure situation. It's a great and simple technique to master. And you feel better immediately when you do it.
I see so much value in what you're saying right now and in this entire conversation. Like, I've never heard of stacking habits with something like another habit that's either already established or something that you do every day. It makes it so much easier where if you can just make that association and just basically attach those 2 things together, it's very, very powerful in that way because it's something that you're already. I've never heard it. I've never heard that before. Dave, this has been eye-opening, insightful, and incredibly valuable. I know that the audience right now listening is being like, okay, listen, I know you haven't just written 1 book. I know you haven't written 2 books. You've written a lot of books, but your new one, Elevate Your Excellence, like if people want to work with you, get into your ecosystem, buy your books, like where should they start? What's the best way for people to find you and kind of learn from you?
Sure. You know, there's a couple of different options. That's the 16th book. So but
I,
I'm old.
I
So,
didn't
you
want to get the
know,
number wrong, but I remember hearing 16. And I'm like, I don't know if that's right. That
it's,
can't be right. But yeah, wow.
but to me, this is the most widely applicable book I've written. This is not a business book.
Hmm.
This is a life book that you can take and apply to anything that you do. Obviously, Amazon or barnesandnoble.com, those people can buy them in Australia, the UK, Singapore, Canada, anywhere from there. You can do the audio. Some people prefer to learn by listening. You can do the audio version. It's been recorded as well. You can go to our website. Our website is just like it sounds, learn to lead, LEARNTOLEAD.com. And we have a lot of free videos and articles and performance aids that can help you there as well. So you can go to our website, I find Amazon is so easy to buy from just with the 1 click. You just go there and it's sent right to you. But it is out now. The book just came out and not that long ago. And so, yeah, it's available or Kindle. Some people like the ebook and all these different versions. So yeah, the book you don't read can't help you, will it?
Well, as you can see behind me, I'm an avid reader. I believe that there's so much information that can be passed on to us, and that would be silly to be starting from zero when we could start from 50, 100, whatever number you want to say. But it just gives you, you can leapfrog so many mistakes and so much by just listening to very wise people like yourself that have information, have distilled information, have life experience, and can just save you a lot of potential pitfalls and stumbles throughout the way. So you'd be silly not to be educating yourself. But no, that's just me. Dave, any parting advice for those parents? I mean, that are trying to be the best that they can be for themselves, for their kids, for their families. What advice would you give a parent that's trying to guide their child to be the best that they can be, both on the course as well as just in life in general?
Be a coach, not a cop.
Mm.
It's about developing people, not punishing people. It's about finding the things they are doing well and rallying around those things, and not just recognizing when there's a major breakthrough. To use a baseball term, sometimes we don't really celebrate till there's a home run. I like to celebrate the little wins, celebrate singles, celebrate those little things that lead to the big things. Don't just celebrate outcomes, celebrate improvements, point to improvements. Don't find fault like there's a reward for it. You never develop somebody by condemning them. Okay. Tell them the truth in love, show them a way to improve. If you look up the definition of coaching, you want to be a coach. A parent is a coach in a sense. It's a process used to improve performance. And we don't do that through belittling, by embarrassing them. You don't motivate through humiliation, through condemnation. It's through process, it's through encouragement, it is through accountability. Saying, was that the best you could do? No, what would your best have looked like? Okay, why do you think that didn't show up? So what can we expect to see going forward? Learning how to have those conversations with them, and just being on their side, and then helping them look in the mirror. Don't nurture their victimhood. Don't tell them what a bad hand they got dealt, how they can't catch a break, how this is the same with everybody in our family. We all go through. It's just get them to take responsibility for what they can control, and get them looking at comparing themselves to who they were yesterday versus who they are today. I think those are some of the best techniques and interventions and collaborative coaching you can do as a parent. You know, and it's just an ongoing process, and they particularly need that positive reinforcement when there's not a whole lot going well. Technically, when people are doing really well, I'm a little harder on them, because I know that's when they most likely slide back, right? At the best coaches you talk to, it says, hey, when we're doing really well, that's when we got to tighten it down a little bit, because prosperity can drain urgency. So understand when it's time to tighten it up, and understand when it's time to pick them up. And there's an art in learning how to do that.
Dave, you're a powerhouse. I knew I would enjoy this conversation. I didn't know that I would enjoy it quite as much as I have, and I know that the audience is probably going to be echoing the same sentiment. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sharing so much wisdom, and we'll definitely have you back on the podcast, because there
I would love that. It's an honor and a privilege. You did a great job. Thank you for thinking of me and having me on, Ryan.
No, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Take care.